Build repeatable, sustainable innovation processes. So last night someone said, well, can you give me an example of what you do? And the example I use with everyone that I talk to is this question of, if I were to come into any one of your organizations and say, how do you create a purchase order in your business? They would lead me down a hallway, we'd go into an office, and someone would pull off the shelf a dusty binder that had a lot of description of exactly how you create a purchase order, all the forms you have to fill out, all the people that you had to talk to, and all the systems that were supported by that. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? So if I go into many of our clients and say, great, how do I do the same with an idea in your organization? Well, there aren't any dusty binders, and there aren't any people, and there aren't any definitions, and there aren't any systems, although increasingly with Bright Idea, there are. But what we need to do is think about innovation as a process that we can define and help people begin to understand what role they play as they innovate. So imagine submitting an idea in your organization and telling people you're not going to respond to them for a minimum 90 to 100 days. You may as well tell them, thanks for your idea, you'll never hear from us again. And the rationale, I think, is they've got too much process up front around legal and evaluation of ideas. What they should be doing is creating a process that says, thank you for your idea, we acknowledge it, and it may take us time, but we're going to regularly come back to you. So I think that they didn't think through the process of just engaging their customers effectively. So from how do you overcome a process issue? Well, I think you have to define what you want and demonstrate to people how the evaluation process is going to work. It's okay for it to change slightly from idea to idea or topic to topic, but we need to define it in such a way that people can understand it, they can understand how their ideas get into the process and how their ideas will be evaluated. Because it makes them better idea submitters, because they'll then understand the context within which their ideas will be evaluated. And then we need to establish a set of criteria so that it's clear and transparent how the idea will be evaluated. So what I missed something. Okay. This is the process that we defined for one of my clients, and we basically try to go in with our clients and define how we want to work from an innovation perspective. And so you'll see we have what we call concept elaboration, which means what is the problem and how do we make clear what the problem and the opportunity is. We did idea generation. We had a feasibility analysis, and I'm going to talk to you and show you a little bit about what that looked like. And then we went through a prototyping and piloting exercise. So from our perspective, being able to break those down and talk about what the steps are and how the work will get done, offline on paper, and then translating that back into a system or a process and training people is really valuable to help you move more quickly through your work. So the way we like to think about this, and I'm not going to address all of this today, but our sort of overall methodology is this concept of a funnel, where we do some opportunity spotting, we look at customer insights, we do idea generation, and then we get to this evaluation and development phase. And again, all that's bounded by corporate strategy, which is the context. And obviously, I'm not going to spend a lot of time today, but talking about everything that happens from a cultural perspective. People do what the culture and both observable culture and the inherent culture tell them to do. And this has a lot to do with what we reward and what we recognize and how we evaluate people. So today, a lot of the things that we're talking about are actually right here in this box. But a lot of this other work then is that context that we talked about. So let's take a really simple example. We'll apologize for that here, but even if you do something as simple as we have idea submission and we allow the crowd to rank the ideas, we go further into idea research using criteria and rank that with a team, and then we have some sort of business case that then is presented. You can begin to use this kind of a very high-level process map. Now, if you think about that process map then in more detail, what we like to do is using this concept of a swim chart. So let's break it down into even more detail. Look at what is the overlying process, what document or data is necessary, who is going to play a role, what metrics would we use, what feedback mechanisms would we use, so how do we tell people what we're doing, and how do we measure ourselves based on what we're doing. And this kind of a swim chart, which if any of you have done process definition, is a pretty straightforward approach. But a lot of times this sort of rigor isn't applied to innovation work. So the more rigor you can apply to it, the more that people can understand how the work will be done and the easier it is to do. But that means, last night we were talking with people from CCH, I think. At any rate, I don't see them where. It's not that big a room. Oh, there you go. The thing we were talking about last night is a lot of times if you'll do your homework up front, even though it may delay the project a little bit in terms of kicking off all the work, but if you do the homework like this up front, the downstream work becomes much more effective and much simpler to accomplish. So if you have these process issues, first get a process, some sort of a defined process in place, and then start thinking about, all right, now what are the evaluation criteria that we ought to use? So from our perspective, we like to use sort of a five-finger approach on ideas. And a lot of it has to do with the kinds of ideas you're looking at. These tend to be a bit more disruptive measurements. But how distinctive is the idea? Are we new to the market, new to the world? Are we a fast follower? And what's our intent? If our intent is to be a fast follower, then that's fine. Is it feasible? And is it feasible with the things that we can do today, with skills and tools that we can get very quickly, or perhaps with a partner? How big and how open is the opportunity itself? Are we looking at a large market with lots of opportunity? Are we looking at a niche with no other competitors and so forth? When we do this, what happens? Do we force our competitors to react? Do we put someone else out of business? Do we disrupt someone else's business? And the last one is the customer impact. Does the customer see this as sort of a me too? Or do they see it as some really new and unexpected benefit? And what we try to do with each one of these criteria then is begin to rate and rank the ideas based on these criteria and other criteria that may be relevant in the particular situation. So you can, again, weight these. You can say, well, distinctiveness in our instance is far more important than market impact. Or maybe it's the reverse in your case. And then you can also add other criteria as necessary. So what we try to do up front is establish these criteria because the clarity it brings around the work that you do, especially in the evaluation process, is really valuable. So what we ultimately ended up, and this is an actual example out of one of our projects, is then we end up with the ability to start rating and ranking ideas. So we had opportunity, feasibility, distinctiveness, market impact, customer impact, return, and alignment to strategy. These were the criteria we used to evaluate ideas. And we ranked them on a 0 to 7 scale. And we had a list of ideas down here, which I've obviously blanked out who the client is and what the ideas were. But what it helped us do is, on a very rigorous process, think about which ideas were valuable, which ideas helped us achieve the goals we had in each one of these criteria, and which ideas, you can see green, red, green. Some of these ideas were very positive in a feasibility area, but were really negative in being distinctive. So what we tried to do is look for ideas that had a lot of green. So for example, this idea that didn't seem to have any big red barriers, or if an idea did have 1 or 2 big red barriers, could we then re-architect the idea in such a way that we could overcome those challenges? And what this led us to was really a really rigorous approach that wasn't bounded by sort of politics or favoritism in the idea process, and allowed us then to train people on this process so that we could bring people in who could understand the process and join the innovation team at any point in the process to help us evaluate. One of the things that we really struggle with a lot is this concept of what we'll call experience. Many organizations don't use the same people to evaluate ideas, and so every time they throw a new team at an evaluation process, they have to come up a learning curve. If you think about most of the processes in your business, people gain experience over the learning curve. They get smarter and smarter because they do jobs repeatedly. And yet in many instances, we ask different people to evaluate different ideas, and there's no learning curve benefit. So one of the things that we've tried to work with a lot of our clients is to have a floating team to begin to get better at evaluating ideas.